Today's interview is with Sterling Chapman. Sterling is out of Louisiana, and he has a bit of an accent, just like me, right? Even though it's slightly different. So great conversation with him today. He talks about how he got to 42 units using the BRRRR and some creative financing strategies, and mainly doing duplexes, quads, and single-family homes. And then he realized he wanted to scale up and go into multifamily. A similar story that we've heard before, but his story is unique in many ways. So really interesting story today and how he's managed to scale up and what's coming next for him. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review. It really does make a difference for the show to help me grow this platform. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you got any questions that pop up in any of these shows, or you just want to talk real estate in general, I'd love to get to know you, love to hear your story, and love to see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. So if you go to the link in the description down below, or you go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com, we can hop on a call and have a great chat. But before that, stick around for today's awesome interview with Sterling Chapman. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barry Gruffis. Now today we have Sterling Chapman with us. Hey Sterling, how are you doing, man?
Hey Barry, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. I'm glad to have you on. I'm glad we were able to connect and kind of make this happen. For anyone who doesn't know, where are you right now, out of interest?
I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay, nice. And that's where we were talking about accents before, how he noticed I had an accent, and he says sometimes he has an accent depending on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah, I say you get it from both sides. So, when I'm down here in southern Louisiana, they'll make fun of me and say I have a Yankee accent. But when I leave Louisiana, they say I have a Cajun accent. So I imagine with your British accent, you kind of get it back and forth.
Yeah, I get it the same way. Yeah, people think I have an American twang when I go back home. Kind of laughable. But so before we dive into the conversation, do you want to give us an idea about, what you've been up to, what your background is, and what you're kind of focused on right now?
Yeah, so I started in real estate, I guess 2.5 years ago. So I have a corporate job. I've been in corporate America, shooting up the ladder. At one point in my life, I wanted to be the next CFO of my industry at my corporate job. And I just started to notice kind of a changing trends in corporate America, things I didn't like. I saw like my boss getting surplused after, so many years of service. And I just started to envision like being like in my 40s with a bunch of kids in private school and mortgages and car notes, and all of a sudden like the corporate faucet turning off and being just like absolutely devastated. And it sent me into like a panic. So I was like, all right, I need to think of like a backup plan. So my initial go into real estate was just, I want to buy some rental properties to, replace, just to provide a little safety net. So I think I started when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in the beginning of 2018. Summer 2018, I bought a couple of rentals. Around the end of 2018, I started burning some properties. I went into some other creative strategies, got a bunch of seller finance properties. Today I have 42 units, mostly duplexes, fourplexes, and single family houses. And we've kind of branched over into the large apartment syndication model. I've been working on that for about a year, just because I wanted to scale. At first, I was managing all those properties by myself, and had a full-time job and had a newborn baby, and and then I started a real estate podcast, and it became overwhelming. So I ended up moving all of the management over to a property management company and started focusing on the apartment syndication arm of my business. So that's where I spend most of my time today.
What do you do what's your W-2 job? What do you do in the corporate world?
So I'm a regional sales director at a telecom company. I manage a big sales team, basically.
How did you get into that? What led you into that, you think?
Yeah, so I went to school originally for finance, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I got recruited out of college by an insurance sales company, Northwestern Mutual. And I thought that I was going to go be a financial advisor, which really just is an insurance salesman. An insurance salesman, it's like 100% commission. It's like, hey, call all your friends and family, and we'll come try and sell them insurance. And then, like, when you fizzle out in a few months, like, we'll still have their business. I mean, some people succeed, and if I were to try and do it today, I'd probably have a lot more luck than I did at 22 when I was, a roller coaster of a kid anyway. And then I found out my best friend from high school was selling cell phones, making 80 grand a year, and he never went to college. So I moved. I moved up north to Idaho and worked with him for a couple years in the cell phone industry, and then came back here and started working I started on the floor level in the retail store selling phones, and then ended up moving into management rather quickly. They paid for my MBA, so I got an MBA while I was doing it, and then I moved into outside sales, and then moved up to bigger businesses that I managed, and then I moved up into management where I was managing the teams that manage those bigger businesses, and it just kind of went up from there.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's the cool thing about doing sales as well. Is I was speaking to someone not long ago about sales, is that it applies to every aspect of your life to some degree, right? Sales, right? You've got to do sales, right? But people hate, for some reason, people hate the word sales, right? They're like, oh, I don't want to be in sales. I don't want to be some salesy. I don't want to be, but it's what you do in every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And there's an aspect of sales that is kind of cringy, that people, the way some people do it. I'm not saying that.
So it's funny because I said that on my team call today with my employees. I was like, I hate the word sales. Like, I wish they wouldn't put it on our business card, and don't ever like say that in front of a client. Like, nobody likes being sold to.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of literature out there that can help you with it. And you're absolutely right. You sell it all. I think in Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, he was like, hey, everybody needs to go take a sales course. Mm-hmm. He told some lady to go take a sales course when she wanted to write a book. She's like, why would I looking down her nose? He goes, hey, do you want to have the best written book or like the number one sold book? Yeah. Like, everything is sales, whether you're convincing your wife to let you buy a truck, or you're, whatever, convincing a seller to sell you a property, convincing a buyer to buy a property, convincing a tenant to move in. I mean, everything's sales. And it's, it didn't come natural at first. I had to read and kind of study up on it and learn different strategies, but it's definitely, I've enjoyed it along the way. So it was definitely something that I excelled at once I kind of committed to constantly sharpening the saw on it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's true. Like you said, you're trying to sell your kids to go to bed. You're trying to sell your wife to let you go to the bar or whatever. Watch the sports game or whatever. It's just that word, right? I think it's like so much other stuff. The word takes over rather than actually what's going on, right? You get turned off by the word rather than actually what it actually means behind it. So I always think that's interesting.
Well, and another thing is, like, there's a lot of products and services out there that like we need, but we ignore because we're like lazy and we don't want to take action or whatever. Like I would have never gone and bought life insurance, but like the reality is, like, my wife's about to stop working and I've got a second kid on the way. Like, I probably need life insurance. You know what I mean? And a friend of mine like sold me life insurance, and if he wouldn't have like pushed me and aggravated me until I got it, then I wouldn't have got it. And the fact of the matter is, like the world's a better place, and my family's safer now that we have it. So, a lot of people are like, they kind of like drift towards inaction out of laziness or confusion or whatever. So I mean, it's sometimes as salespeople, we're helping them do the right thing. So it's not always this like grease back, car salesman trying to sell you a bogus bag of goods. There's a lot of people out there, that are, giving you good products. Like, I welcome all the advertisements that people send me. I'm like, dude, I wasn't even thinking I needed that. Um,
And it pops up on your Instagram feed. Some of those other
yeah, Facebook knows I need stuff before I do these days.
I know. It's like, wow, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's so interesting how that pops up. It's scary how much they read your mind sometimes, but it's
Oh
like,
yeah, that's
but
a
it's
whole
like you
nother
said,
conversation.
yeah, but it's like you said, sometimes you don't realize you need stuff, right? And you need someone to kind of push you in that direction. So um, I think that's such a great point. But then, you said you were in your job and you realized you saw some stuff that goes on. And I hear this all the time interviewing people, and you probably do on your podcast as well, that people, their goal was to initially climb that corporate ladder, fill up their IRA, fill up their 401k, and retire when they were 60, 65 or whatever, right? And just, keep going that route. But, at some point, a lot of people realize that there's, the job that they have isn't secure, right? It's not guaranteed, right? It's not, there's nothing secure about it when you have wife and you have kids and you have all this.
One stream of income.
Exactly.
I mean, dude, we just laid off thousands of people this past summer, and I could have very easily been one of them. I mean, I wasn't, but I could have been. I thought I might be. And I really wasn't worried about it. The last time they did layoffs, before I started investing in real estate, I was panicked. Oh my God, what would I do? But this go round, I had all those rentals cash flow. And I was I'd be fine, really. And it was such watching all of my peers in complete panic mode and devastation. And I was just man, I mean, my job's cool. It's nice to have that big income, but I'd be fine. My family would be fine because of all these cash flow and rentals,
Yeah.
And that was it's a completely different perspective on life.
Yeah. And yeah, that's really interesting. That's what a point that's not always brought up is that, yes, you have a plan B, though. That's why I started investing in real estate, because I was in the entertainment industry and I realized I needed a plan B, because entertainment industry is one of the most fickle business you can be in, right? One minute you're the most popular person in the world, and the next you're without a job, right? Just overnight, just like that. But I realized I needed a plan B. But also, and having that plan B from real estate is great, because if things go south and you're without a job, right, you have that backup plan. But also what it gives you as well is just what you talked about there. It gives you that power, that freedom, that feeling of okay, whatever happens, I've got my real estate. I'm going to be okay, And I think that's so empowering. In the Choose FI, do you know the FI community, the FIRE community, financial independent, financially independent, retire early community? I see posts quite often about people that say once they got to that financial independent, even though when they had a job, they didn't have to take shit from their boss, right? They didn't have to just be it's not about being an asshole, but it's sometimes you're in a job, and if that's just the job that you have and you don't have anything else, you've got to do whatever you have to clamor and hold on to that job. But when you don't have that, it's not about being a bad employee. I'm not saying anyone then be a bad employee, but when you have that power to be hey, listen, I'm not letting you treat me like this. Hey, I'm not letting you talk to me like this. It can be empowering for a lot of people. And
it affects you in a lot of areas of life that you don't even think about how it might affect you. So there's certainly the I really don't need this job. So it allows you to make decisions from a different perspective, and you make better decisions when you're not making them out of desperation.
Yeah.
And that's, something else to note. When I first started in real estate, people, thought I might be distracted from my day job, but the actual phenomenon that happened there was I wanted more money to invest in real estate. So I sold twice as much. So I actually started doing way better at my day job. But as far as how it impacts you afterwards, I'm a better dad because I'm not stressed out all the time. I'm nicer to my wife because I'm not uber stressed out. If work gets super stressful, I can always fall back to a mental solace of well, you don't need it. And a lot of people get eaten up by that stress and they take it out on everybody else in their life, and it affects their marriage. It affects their family life. It affects, how they interact they go home and kick their dog or whatever, so that freedom, it positively impacts your life in ways that you don't even think about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not, because so many people think people invest in real estate for that monetary value, right? For that monetary gain. It's that number. I want to be, $1 million bank. And a lot of us do, but it's so much more behind that number or behind those.
So
right.
I'm very intentional about what I want to accomplish and why I want to accomplish it. And I was telling my family this on Sunday night because my family, they just think I'm a workaholic, right? Because I work all day for the day job, and then I work all night and all weekends doing this stuff. So they're like, oh, well, Sterling just loves to work. He just work. He just wants to be a big time businessman and make billions of dollars. And that's what Sterling is. But it's quite the opposite. Like, I don't need to be Grant Cardone. I don't want a statue of me as some big successful businessman. What I want is to retire at 40 and never have to work again, so I can spend an obnoxious amount of time with my family and my kids, and traveling the world with my wife. Like, I want freedom. I want time. I don't want to, dive into a big pile of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. That's not what gets me on. That's not my end goal. My end goal is to get enough to have the freedom to have lifestyle choices.
100%. That's exactly pretty much summed up what my goal is with it. Yeah, the money is the goal because the money provides that life, right? It's not because I want to drive a Ferrari. It's not because I want to live in a friggin' 10,000 square foot house. It's none of that. It's because what that money provides for me and my family, right? It's that, just like you said, that freedom to do whatever I want, right? To go traveling if I want, to spend time with my kid and hopefully kids in the future, be with my wife, right? And like you said, it's going to lead to you being happier, I think, right? Back to that point of having that freedom and not being scared of losing your job or not having to rely on the job to provide everything for you, right? It's that freedom to do that. And I think that's huge when people understand that. I think that's why people get addicted to real estate, I think, because it's that lifestyle that you can create for your life, for yourself. That's just absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
So interesting. What made you choose real estate, you think? Like, so obviously you came to that decision, right? And your realization that I need another stream of income, need to create something like else going on for me.
Well,
why real estate, you think?
Initially it wasn't so much I needed another stream of income. So the way it happened was I was finishing my MBA at the end of 2017, and I was taking all these like entrepreneurship classes and management classes, and I was, like you do in college, I was like getting all these like high level ideas, and oh man, I would love to do my own thing, but I'm not that smart. Like, I'm in the telecom industry, and I don't know how to freaking install a router. Like, I'm not going to go start my own telecom company. You know what I mean? And like, I was trying to think of like how I could do something entrepreneurial. I've always had that like wanted to take control of my own life type of spark, but never really like was good enough at anything to go out and do it. And then at that same time that I was kind of going through that like exploratory part of my life as I was finishing up my MBA, I got a promotion, and it was the first time that like I was making six figures in my life. And I was so excited, and I called my dad to like, brag or, hey, aren't you proud of me? And, and he was like, well, look, you need to like figure out what to do with that money, because if you make a bunch of money and then you end up broke, like you look dumber than if you never made the money to begin with. And I was like, all right. So I went and I bought the first book I bought was, and I totally disagree with most of what he says, but Dave Ramsey.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was so funny because my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, but I read that book and I was like, look, we're not going to have any debt. We're not going to have any credit cards, blah, blah, blah. And then the next book I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I went back to her like 3 days later. I was like, scratch that. We're going to borrow as much money as we can. She's like, dude, whatever. I don't know. Just let me know where you land. And, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad really outlined the benefits of the real estate asset classes. And I think from there, I kind of read a bunch of other like Rich Dad advisor books, like Tom Wheelwright's tax book, and then like Ken McElroy's book on apartment investing. And I kind of went on, from there and kept reading like The Millionaire Next Door, then The Richest Man in Babylon. And so then somebody introduced me to the Bigger Pockets podcast, and I was training for triathlons at the time. So I was running and biking constantly. And like, I was tired of the same old like songs I'd listened to a million times. So I started listening to Bigger Pockets podcast, and I must have listened to, 200 of them, and I was so entrenched in it at that point. And I was really insistent that I wanted to get in like that was before I had a kid. It was before I, had got married and stuff. And I was like, I want to get like knee deep in this thing before like my life gets real busy, because I know once my life gets real busy, I'll never start. And it's true. Like if I were to discover real estate for the first time today, like I would probably never do it because I'm just so freaking busy, like with my wife and my kids and all that kind of stuff. But like I wasn't then. And I knew like I'd heard somebody say something called like the law of diminishing intent. Like when you first get all pumped up and excited about something, there's like a really good chance you're going to do it. But like every month you wait is like that much smaller chance that you're going to take action. And my thought was like, if I already had houses and was like knee deep in this thing and already doing it, like I wasn't going to stop because life got busy, but I might not start if life got busy. So I was so anxious to start. And I bought 2 houses, and then I ran out of money. And I was so mad at that point that I was out of money and I couldn't like buy any more, that I almost like stopped listening to the books and the podcasts, because it was just irritating me that I couldn't take any more action. And instead I went and bought and listened to Brandon Turner's Low and No Money Down book, and figured out a way to burr some duplexes. And I borrowed money to do that, and it all worked out. And that was like my proof of concept. And from there, I just kind of hit the ground running and do it over and over. And, from then on, raising money and fixing up houses wasn't, or duplexes or fourplexes or 50 units or whatever. It just wasn't a big deal, once I had that proof of concept.
Yeah, that's cool. The first 2 properties that you bought, what how did you buy? Was it just the traditional find an agent, MLS, put 20%?
Yeah. So the first 2 properties I bought, let me see. It's weird. So I went through a couple agents because they, and nothing against the agents, but like, agents aren't really designed to work with real estate investors. Like real estate investors want to make like 50 offers at like 60%. And like real estate agents want to show like 3 houses to a woman who's going to pick out a nice kitchen and buy a $300,000 house. They don't want to show 120 houses to me and fill out like 50 offers that are half of what the asking is. You know what I mean? So I went through some, I finally landed the first house I got. I called the listing agent, like the agent that was showing me houses at the time was out of town on vacation. I just got tired of dealing with it. So I called the listing agent, which worked out well for me because she just called the owner and I just like grabbed the phone from her. I don't like the agents in the middle. Like I'm a sales trainer. I don't need all these layers in between me and the end. So I grabbed the phone from her and I talked to him, and I talked him down like $5,000, and I got that first house. And then a couple weeks later, I did the same thing with another house, like listing agent. It was a short sale. And then from there was where it got interesting from there, I went and bought the next 2 I'll tell this story, although I feel like I've told it on every podcast I've been on. But so I found 2 duplexes, and they were like in really bad shape and they needed to be fixed up. And I talked to the seller and I got them under contract for $190 for both of them.
Wow.
And at this point, I only had 2 houses. I'd never, they were turnkey when I bought them. I'd never fixed anything up. So I didn't have any money, any experience, or any investors. I had a friend who flipped houses all the time, and he had investors for his house flipping business. And he was always like, dude, if you want to buy rentals, like find a rental that I can fix up and I'll sell it to you for like 20% below market. And then like, I'll just make a little bit and you can still get it cheaper than if you're buying something off the MLS. So he'd like proposed that to me a few times. So I went and got this property under contract with absolutely zero way of being able to buy it, which was terrifying. I do it all the time now, but at the time it was terrifying. And I went to him and I said, look, we can get this thing for 190. It's going to cost 60 to fix it up. And then, you know, if you add me to the title, use your investors, fix it up, I'll give you the contract. You can fix it up. And then I'll do a cash out refinance after they're fixed up. And I'll pay your contractors. I'll pay your investors, their interest, and I'll give you 50 grand.
Wow.
And he was like, 50 grand, done. Let's do it. So we did that, and they appraised at 390.
Wow.
So I did a 80% cash out refinance. When I did the cash out refinance, they kicked him off the title. So they're just with me now. And so on a $390,000 appraised value, we pulled out 312 grand. That paid his investors back for buying it. It paid the investors back for the construction, and it paid him $50,000. I walked away with $2,000 a month in cash flow and $80,000 a month in $80,000 in equity.
Wow. Now that's a deal.
Yeah.
That's the deal. That's the type of deal you'd want to do all day, every day, right?
Yeah.
So there's a few things there. For one, like, so you've got 2 properties, but you have never done anything like this before, right? Not used hard money, not done a cash out refi, not do anything. What gave you the courage to go ahead and put that deal under contract and move forward, you think?
That was, it was terrifying. I never told anybody at the time, but like I didn't sleep for 3 months. I mean, the whole process was terrifying to me. I don't know what gave me the courage. You know, the fact that my buddy who flipped houses was willing to take it on, you know, he had experience, and I thought like he wouldn't get himself and his investors' money all wrapped up in this deal if he didn't think he could do it. So that, you know, that gave me a little solace there. But yeah, it was a big step for me. There was money kind of coming from all places. Some of it was like, it was his investors' money, but then it was also my brother's money to cover a shortfall from what his investors cover. So there was like, I mean, there was a million people I could have let down in a bad way. Mm-hmm. And it was all on my shoulders. And it certainly took courage to get through that process. So it all worked out.
So the private money on that one, you raised yourself, or your friend helped you?
So and
then did you do hard, like, talk us through the financing on that one then, I guess, is a bigger question.
Okay. All right. So my friend said he was going to bring the money from it was like his hard money lenders. We're going to bring the money, and he was going to buy it, and he was going to fix it up. But it required 190 to buy it and 60 to fix it up. So 250 total. And his investors only had 210 available. So I went to my brother and I said, look, I'm trying to put this deal together. And if you throw in 40 grand, I'll give you 30% on your money.
Wow.
30% annual rate of return. So basically in 6 months, I'll give you back 15% of $40,000. So I gave him 6 months after he gave it to me, I gave him 46,000 back. So that was like the missing piece. So basically my friend bought it. He used his investors' money, his hard money, and then he used the money from my brother, and they went to the closing table. He bought it. He listed me on the title. Then once he fixed it up, I went to the bank and I said, hey, can you do, and granted, I went to the bank way before we ever bought it, and I got the bank's commitment that they would do this. Mm-hmm. But so that's another caveat. The first bank lied to me. They said they would do it, and then like a week beforehand, they backed out. So I had to go scramble and find another bank, but luckily the other bank did it. But I went to the bank and I said, I have 2 duplexes. I'm on the title. I think they're worth 390 grand. If you appraise them and they're worth 390 grand. Will you give me 80% cash out? And they said, yeah. So we went to the closing table. They handed me a check for 312 grand. The title attorney removed my buddy off of the title. I was the sole person on the title, with the lien now being held by that bank. And I took that 312 grand and I distributed it to my friend's investors, my brother, and I gave my friend the $50,000 I promised him for being able to help me put it all together.
Nice, nice. So how did you find this deal? Well, did you find it through wholesalers, MLS?
This particular deal was, so it was not listed on the MLS. I went to go look at another duplex across the street that was on the MLS that I also own today, but I didn't own at the time. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, I saw these really beat up ones across the street, and there was a like a sign stapled to the front door with like a phone number written in it in permanent marker. So I called the phone number, and the guy kind of blew me off. Mm-hmm. I think it didn't work out when I first found it. And then like 4 months later, it's something else I was really trying to find and put a deal together, like 4 months later. And I had his number saved in my phone, and I called him and I was like, look, let's make a deal. And he said, okay. So that was how it, yeah.
That's kind of crazy. That's
yeah.
kind of being in the right place, right time to some extent, right? But it's also being, there was luck, but obviously other people could have gone there.
I drove up and down hundreds of streets and looked at hundreds of houses. So like, I wouldn't have bumped into it if I wasn't doing that. I mean, you can call it luck, but like, how many streets did I drive down that I didn't find a gold nugget on?
That's exactly it, right? There was definitely some luck involved, right? But also you put yourself in that position. Your hard work and your determination created that luck, right? And it's just, it's cool. It's the more you put yourself in these situations, the more likely you are that something's going to go. The more you stand up to bat, right? Using a baseball analogy, if you stand up at the more often, you're going to hit more home runs than someone who doesn't, right? If you step up 100, 1,000 times, whatever it is, you're going to eventually hit one, and it kind of seems like that was happening. That's what happened with that one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And I think what's cool as well is that, so you talked about like the first two deals that you had, all your money had gone, right? I think sometimes it would be great to have $100 million to invest in real estate, right? But a lot of times we don't. And sometimes it's good to get rid of that crutch, right? Once that money is gone, you have to find other ways, right? If you have that money, you can go 20% on the MLS, find it, do that traditional route or whatever, right? But once that money is gone, that's when you've got to really figure out things and become a real investor to some extent, right? In my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, when you're putting down, you're not really creating anything when you're putting down 20%, when you're burring houses or duplexes, and you're like, putting down, buying them for 100 and putting 50 into them, and now they're worth 200. Well, now you're really hiking up your net worth on a consistent basis. Like we talk about W-2 life and like depositing money into a 401k. I think I added more money to my net worth in like 4 separate months in 2020 than I accumulated in my 401k after 7 years at my day job. I'll tell you the numbers. So I have like 70 grand in my 401k, and I've put the 6%, for the last 7 years, and they match the 6%, and it's like 70 grand. I mean, that's great, but I did this year, since the pandemic started, I've done 4 burr houses, and like 3 of those 4 burr houses, I added 70 grand to my net worth. Like I did one house that I was all in for 140. Like I think I bought it for 80, put 60 into it. I was all in for 140, and it appraised at 209. I did another house that I was all in for 130, and it appraised for 200. And then this most recent house I did last month, it appraised for 177, and I'm all in for like 107.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and I mean, each one of those projects took me a month. You know what I mean? I literally like increased my net worth in a month, the same amount that I did over 7 years doing the traditional route.
That's incredible. What did you throw some numbers out, but what did they look like in terms of a cash flow perspective? A lot of these deals.
So those don't look as good because I ripped so much of the cash flow out. I have a lot of cash flow from other properties I did, but those most recent ones, I would say that they probably cash flow $100 a month.
Okay.
But you got to understand, I made an executive decision on these properties, whereas I could have left a lot of that cash in, but it like on 2 of those properties I just described, I took over $20,000 out, more than I put in, right? So I borrowed the money to buy it and fix it up. And then I did the cash out refinance, and I paid all that money back with interest. And then I had an extra $27,000 sitting in my bank account that I didn't have before. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, I could have left all that in the house and it would have cash flowed $200 a month. But like, it's going to take a lot of months at $200 a month to add up to $27,000. And I'm like, I'm still following all of the proper principles about building long-term wealth with real estate. I'm still getting a little cash flow. I'm still cash flow positive. I'm not banking on appreciation, but I'm cash flow positive. So, you know, in a bind, I'm not going to lose it. I'm not spending money from my day job to pay for keeping the asset. I'm not selling the asset. You know, I'm having tenants pay down the debt. I'm holding it long-term to let it appreciate. And I got, you know, 27 grand out of it today versus waiting 14 years to accumulate 27 grand in cash flow.
Yeah, you're turning that money, right? That's what that's what essentially it is. You're able to pull that money out and then use that money to invest in something else.
Exactly.
And then hopefully do that again. And then you just create that velocity of money and building that portfolio. And, you know, like you said, you could have left it in, and, you know, everyone has to make that decision based on their own circumstances and each dealer, right? And maybe each dealer doesn't always make sense, but you create that velocity money, and it's better to almost have 20 properties cash flowing 100 than
right.
a property that gets the same amount of cash flow, because you're building that wealth over each one. Each one is hopefully
right.
appreciating, paying debt, pay down all those properties, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's a great strategy. I think the BRRRR method.
Yeah.
Is that how you go ahead? Sorry.
So like on one occasion, I don't remember which house it was, but I pulled like 25,000 out of it, and then I turned around and bought like, I think it was 2 fourplexes and 2 duplexes at 5% down, seller finance, for like 21 grand. That's cash flowing me like 2 grand a month. So it was like, yeah, I mean, I pulled the cash out here and didn't get the $300 a month cash flow, but I mean, I got the 2 grand over here because I pulled that money and I used it to buy another asset.
Yeah.
That's appreciating and paying the debt down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And is that how you grew up your portfolio to 42 units? You mainly using the BRRRR method?
So I would say I attribute it to 2 different things. Half of the portfolio is BRRRR. Mm-hmm. The other half the portfolio is seller finance, like low money down. So I found somebody that's like 75 and they've been, you know, 1031ing their properties for 30 years, and they just don't want to take the tax hit of dumping them all at once, but they're 75 and they want to retire. So, they're just like, hey, you take the properties off of it. Like, we don't want all the money at once because it's going to be an obnoxious tax burden. And then also we don't know what to do with it. So they seller financed it to me at like half the portfolio is, I think, 6.5%. The other half of the portfolio is 5.5%. But, you know, they know me. They feel comfortable with me that I'm a good operator, that I'll continue to pay the debt, and they feel secure that their money's earning them 6.5%, and they're just, you know, taking the tax down in little bite-sized increments instead of, you know, writing $100,000 tax bill to check this month.
Yeah, that's a great. That's another great strategy. Is how are you finding these deals then with these owner deals?
The seller finance or the BRRRR deals?
The seller finance.
The seller finance is, I mean, just really everything in real estate is just the people business. I make friends everywhere I go. I talk to everybody everywhere I go. I network as much as I can. I saw this guy was offering to seller finance some properties that I wasn't interested in buying, although I think I might own them today. But at the time, I wasn't interested in buying them because of their location. But I said, can we go to lunch and talk anyway? And, you know, older folks that have been doing this a long time, and if you ask, like, they love talking to young guys that are getting started. Like, there's so many people out there willing to help, you know, if you just ask. And we went out to lunch, and I didn't end up buying those properties that he had listed on the MLS. But, you know, he goes, I have these other ones. And I said, oh, well, those are in a better area. I like those. And so I bought those. And then a few months went by and I bought a fourplex from him. And then a few months went by and I bought, you know, a couple more duplexes from him. And so that was kind of how a lot of my seller finance properties work. As far as the BRRRR properties, I found them all through wholesalers. I've entertained the idea of like kind of putting together some deal sourcing strategy before, but it seems like a lot of work. And I, like, again, I have a day job, and they got wholesalers out there who do all the work for you. And by all means, if I can make 70 grand in equity off of a deal, like, go ahead, make your 5 grand wholesaler fee. Like, please take it, go find me another one. So I'm working on getting a better deal flow for my apartment side of my business, because I think that would be worth the work. But as far as these smaller, like, single family BRRRR houses, I'm happy with the wholesalers. They seem to always, a different one just always happens to show up when I need one.
That's because you don't need to. That's a great thing about real estate, right? You don't need to do everything yourself, right? It'd be great to find your own deals and save whatever, but at the same time, what is that time worth, right? That effort to go into finding deals. Just use, if you can find good wholesalers, right? That's not always easy, but if you find good wholesalers that's bringing you a good deal, you know, it's worth to pay them a $10,000 assignment, sure, right? If the deal makes sense and you can support that, right? You've got to allow that into your underwriting.
I think they man, I always try and encourage people to go out and be wholesaler. I would never do it, but I try and encourage other people who, like, well, I'm in a different situation with my day job and my salary and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of these guys that are showing up at these meetups, like, they got nothing. They got no income, no experience, you know, nothing to lean on, but they're willing to go hustle. And I'm like, dude, the average deal that I get from a wholesaler, they make 15 grand. I'm like, I'll pay you 15 grand 3 times a month to bring me deals. Yeah. Like, go find them.
Yeah. Well, now you said you've gone down the apartment syndication route, right? So yeah, people might say, like, you've got 42 units, you've had great success getting to that point. Why not just continue doing that and get yourself to 100 units doing the same thing, right? You know, you've had success in that. What do you try to kind of switch and go into apartment syndication?
You know, it's so funny because Joe Fairless and John Cohen both asked me that question on their podcast, and I didn't realize that they were probably just setting me up to give the correct answer. I thought they were, like, legit asking me, and I was like started to question what I was doing with my life. I'm like, oh man, maybe they're right. But then I later realized they were just probably setting me up to, like, actually give the right answer. So the right answer, in which I've decided to do, it's scalable. I mean, again, I was at a point where I was managing those 42 units and I just hated my life. I mean, it was 24/7, just chasing them down. And then there's a lot of other things like there's a lot of issues in South Louisiana or any market, but my market is South Louisiana. So you've got flood is a big issue that can come up. You've got the oil field could go bust and like 50% of the people could move out of South Louisiana. And what's that going to do to your vacancy rate? You've got, really bad economic factors that some areas are just getting more and more dangerous. I had a tenant pull a gun on my property manager the other day. I mean, you've got so many reasons to want to kind of diversify your risk into other areas. So when it comes to apartments, I shop in markets that have great key economic indicators. I look for places that have populations trending upwards. Where I live, populations trending downward. People are fleeing the state. I look for places with great job diversity, different types of employers. Where I live, it's pretty heavily weighted on oil. I look for places with low vacancy rates, with, decreasing crime rates. Where I live, crime's going up. I look for places with like declining poverty and increasing total income in homes and total home values. So when I look at those markets, if I had my portfolio spread out across the country in different areas, if a tornado came through and wiped out all my Oklahoma City properties, which I just made that up. I don't have any Oklahoma City properties, but you know what I'm saying? The concept is still, tornado came in and wiped out all my Oklahoma City properties. Well, I'd be glad I had all these ones in Baton Rouge to back me up. And, the same concept, like I'll be glad I have the ones in Alabama and Georgia if something happens to the ones in Baton Rouge. And I just to scale, I want bigger, nicer properties. I like the idea of raising money to go out and buy properties. I feel like, another thing is like the kind of loans I'm getting on these properties that I'm doing. Like I've never been told no, but I can only imagine it's at some point they're going to cut me off. Mm-hmm. Because here's the problem with small banks and financing like that. Theoretically, you can grow forever as long as you're really slow and you pay all your taxes and you claim all your revenue. But when you buy 42 properties in 2 years, what's happening is your debt is building up faster than your income is reporting on your tax returns. Mm-hmm. So you're going to kind of get log jammed, and they're going to be like, well, you've got millions of dollars in debt and you don't have the income to support that. I'm like, well, but it's on the rent, it's coming. And then when you're fixing up properties and you're writing off all your maintenance expenses and you're depreciating properties and you're trying to get out of paying an obnoxious amount of taxes, well, then you're log jamming yourself even further. And they're like, wait, it's not. So eventually, like every time I refi a property, I'm like, is this going to be the one where they're like, hey, game's over. Like you need to wait until next year and you can show your tax returns and pay a bunch of taxes in the meantime to, you know what I mean? So there's always kind of like it's not scalable. It's not like it is scalable very slowly. Like if I want to add 3 houses a year and then report all that rent and, have that balance it out next year, as long as, but even then it's not scalable when you're cash flowing a couple $100 a month, because they want you to stay at a 50% debt to income ratio. And unless you're literally renting your properties out for like 3 times what the mortgage is, every property you get pulls you further down until you can't. But with apartment syndication, you're getting large non-recourse loans that are, scalable forever. You can just keep stacking them up. The assets support, the income from the asset supports the loan. You're raising the money for the equity. And if you build a good solid system to do that, then you're never going to run out of capital. if you build a good deal flow, system, and you can do it all over the country. So it's a good diversified risk. Just bigger is better, and it's repeatable and it's
Yeah.
scalable.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's like you said with the smaller residential stuff. Yes, the loans are good in some ways because you don't have a balloon and it's 30-year amortized over 30 years, and you're getting.
Well, not all of mine. Most.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm lazy. And I can't deal with the underwriting on the Fannie Mae loans. I got a bunch of commercial loans, but I did get an email today that I'm about to move about $1 million in balloon loans over to a portfolio loan with a lender that's going to do a 30-year fixed. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that gives you some breathing.
Yeah. I mean, none of my loans are due for 4 years, but it seems like a really inopportune time for loans to be coming due. As crazy as the world's going, and will probably keep going for the next few years, I'd rather not anything due anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't blame you, especially $1 million, right? Well, in the future. That's cool. And like you said, with apartments and larger apartments, you can get non-recourse, so you're not on the hook if anything goes wrong, and not that anyone expects anything to go wrong, but you don't want that. And plus, they're not underwriting you as an individual so much, right? Yes, they want to look at your track record, your net worth, your liquidity, but it's not like what car payments do you have, right? What's your mortgage payment, all that stuff. It's more on the property itself than actually what you're doing. So, and you can do it as many times. You can get 100 loans a year if you can find that many deals, and you have the bandwidth to do all that. You can kind of do that, right? You're not limited, like you said, to a certain amount of debt and a certain amount of loans.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, man. This has been a really interesting interview to get to 42 in 2 years, right? That's no joke to go to 42 units in 2 years. That's just unbelievable, especially when you consider how you did it, right? A lot of it wasn't that you had a ton of capital that you were just throwing around finding these deals. You found some owner-occupied deals, and then you also did the PERS strategy to kind of really maximize what you started with. So I think that's cool. And it's, what's cool about that is that it shows you what you can do, right? It just for anyone who wants to kind of go out there and hustle like you did and work your ass off, right? And learn the business and do the right stuff. You can do that, and you can grow so much in such a small period of time. But as you alluded to there, it's cool that you're as well going into the apartment syndication space, because there's a lot of opportunity there as well, right? You can grow exponentially there as well. So that's really cool. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I warned you beforehand, I like to ask some wrestling related real estate questions, even though the first one isn't necessarily real estate related. But what would be a wrestling name if you had to pick one for yourself?
A wrestling name.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like something with cowboy in it. I've always fancied myself a cowboy.
Cowboy Chapman. That's got a ring to it. Cowboy Chapman. I like that. Or Cowboy Chaps or something like that. So every wrestler has a special move, right? When they hit that special move in the match, it's over. What is your special move in real estate, you think?
In real estate, I would say my strength is finding deals. And I think it's really that's kind of an evolution from the networking piece. So I would say I would say that the networking, real estate is such a people business. Every aspect of the real estate, I mean, from finding great tenants to getting great tenants to treat you well and pay you, to contractors, getting them to not rip you off and getting them to, show up to your job before the other 3 jobs they have booked at the same time, to meeting appraisers and making friends with them so they give you the best possible appraisal in the refi, to building good relationships with all the wholesalers in town, and having a good relationship with them and a good reputation with them. So all the wholesalers in town call me first because they know I'll close. So it's just, everything is a relationship business, but real estate is certainly no different. All of the success I've had, a lot of the seller finance properties came from one guy that I didn't think had anything I wanted, but I took them to lunch anyway. The starting of the Burr happened for a friend of mine who was looking to get taken care of. So I try and take care of everybody I come in contact with. I always pay contractors more than I need to. I try when I can to take better care of everybody than necessary.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I love that, because I think if you find good people and you take care of them, I think that's huge, right? I was talking about that with someone the other day. Just if you pay them a little extra, give them a gift card or whatever it is, do something to show that you're appreciative, because these people can make you a lot of money, right? And it's about treating them right, so they treat you right, and it's a reciprocity thing, right? You take care of people and they're going to take care of you. So I think that's huge. I think that's a great strength to have, I think, for sure. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate career? There's probably been a few, huh?
Yeah, underestimating not rehab cost. I'm pretty good on rehab cost. Underestimating ongoing maintenance cost. So my first house, that was seemingly a great deal. I bought it for $72,000. I ended up putting $14,000 down. I put barely anything into it, maybe a couple grand. So I'm like all in for like 15 grand. And the note on it, including the insurance and taxes, was $560. And I had it rented like on the second week for $1,060. And so that's $500 a month. And the tenant stayed in it for 2 years. So it's like, oh, wow, what a rock star deal. $6,000 a year, you're making 30% of your money. Well, I had to replace the AC, and I had to replace not the AC. I had to do a lot of work on the AC. It came out to a couple grand. And then I had to replace the sewer line, which came out to $6,000. And then I had to do some other maintenance issues. And by the time I was done with all this, like I didn't make any money off of that property. Mm-hmm. So I've got a pretty big, a lot of those seller finance properties are older and had a lot of deferred maintenance on them. So, fortunately, I've got so much, I call it fictitious cash flow, that all these huge maintenance expenses are being covered by the cash flow at the moment. And I think we'll get like to the other end of it once everything gets getting fixed up. A lot of it's stuff that like won't be an issue for a long time. For example, tons of plumbing issues. Well, I've got a lot of 70-year-old properties with cast iron plumbing, and cast iron plumbing only lasts 70 years. So once I replace it all with, PVC, well, I'll be good for another 100 years. But I'm just at the point where like replacing them all is getting expensive. So, I mean, it's fine. Like I still have my day job and I'm not like dependent on the real estate cash flow, but I'm currently going through a season where the maintenance expenses that I was not expecting is eating up way more of that cash flow than I would like to admit.
Yeah, and I think that's a common mistake that people make when they start out with, right? So my taxes, insurance, and mortgage is $700, and my rent is $1,000. So I'm making $300 a month, right? And I spend that $300 on whatever I want. Well, then all of a sudden, like, HVAC goes out. There's a leak. There's like, there's always going to be something that goes on wrong with rental property, right? And you've always got to assume that it will go wrong. So I think it's interesting you say that, because I've found that to be the case as well. You don't know what's going to go wrong until it happens, and it usually isn't cheap when it goes wrong as well.
Right.
So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I thought about that, and man, my partner is going to kill me if he hears this, but I'm sure he knows it. So, in our syndication business, we've been working for a year, and there has been like a lot of deals that hey, let's pull the trigger, let's do it. And I've just been scared, I mean, we've since pulled the trigger, and I'm very comfortable with the evolution of how everything's gone. But early on, like, what if I can't raise the money? What if I can raise the money and we screw up the deal and I lose the money? What if, you know what I mean? Like, all these things go through your head, and it just, that fear, especially in the the syndication world. I mean, with the smaller properties, that's like smaller numbers, smaller fear. But when you're like looking at buying multi-million-dollar assets, like you know, you got to catch your breath. And I've certainly hesitated and not pulled the trigger when maybe we should have pulled the trigger in the past. I mean, that being said, everything's worked out, and I'm, you know, I'm glad we have the experience and everything now to, you know, to where now I'm comfortable attacking that kind of deal. So maybe it's better that I waited, but I've certainly been in situations where I could have pulled the trigger earlier, and I definitely let fear hold me back.
And how have you overcome that since then? Education, surrounding yourself with certain
Um,
people?
I think it has a lot to do with partnerships, and, you know, you don't have to do it all yourself. Like I think education helps as well, and just, I don't know, it's everything kind of builds on itself,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, cool, man. Well, thank you for sharing that all today. It's been a fun interview with Cowboy Chaps.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. But before we go, like, can you share where people can get a hold of you if they want to find out more about your company? What before that, actually, what's your podcast called? Give it a plug. And
Sure. So my podcast is called The Rent Roll Radio Show. Please go check us out on all your we're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google, everywhere you find podcasts. We also have a YouTube channel called The Rent Roll Radio Show, where it's basically all we do is, you know, produce the videos, recordings of our podcast. And then my company is Crestworth Capital, and you can go find us on crestworthcapital.com. You can find us at rentrollradio.com. You can learn more about me at sterlingchapman.com. Or you can email me at sterling@crestworthcapital.com, or call me at 225-247-5562. I love to chat real estate, and I talk about it. I always, you know, a lot of times when I give out my information, I feel like newbies are like, think they're going to bother me. I'm like, no, you don't get it. I like to talk about real estate so much that my friends and family don't want to hear about it. So, I mean, call me. I'll talk to you anytime about it.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's another reason why I love doing this podcast, is because it gives me a reason to
An
talk.
outlet, yeah.
Yeah, I know the other person on the line enjoys talking about real estate. It's not like some random guy I meet at Starbucks and I'm talking his ear off about real estate, you know, and he's like, oh my God, will this guy shut up, you know? So yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. I'll put all those links in the description below so everyone can find them. But thank you so much, Ram, for making time. I really appreciate it. It was a really fun interview, man. It was cool talking to you. And your success is inspiring, man. It really is. And I'm looking forward to what comes next for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.